Yes, as the campaigns for the 2023 polls gather momentum, some of the leading presidential candidates are breaking down their manifestos and detailing steps they would take to revive Nigeria's ailing economy. Presidential candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Bola Tinubu, says if he is elected president, he will need the cooperation and support of the private sector to implement the reforms in his economic master plan. Senator Tinubu says he would revive industries by bringing the Nigeria's industrial policy to life through creation of major and minor industrial hubs in each of the geographical zones. He added that his administration will actively participate in the digital economy to birth the fourth industrial revolution and target a minimum GDP growth of between 6 to 10%. Other areas he said he would focus on include agriculture, electricity, and the championing of a buy made in Nigeria to grow Nigeria mantra. Well, joining us now is a lawyer and APC supporter, Oluwaseun Fale. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast. Now, the presidential candidate of the APC acknowledged that our political economy has been imbalanced and is in need of a major reform. When you look at all that he has, reeled out with regards to how he intends to address, the issues with regards to our economy. Talk to us, which of this stands out for you as a way out of the imbalance we have witnessed thus far?
There are a lot of them contained in this economic manifesto. I think first and foremost is the plan to restructure our economic model, where we focus most importantly on export-led growth. You will see, and I think most economists have alluded to the fact that the structure of our economy, where we basically export raw materials and then import expensive finished materials, it's not sustainable. So importantly, within the mantra of Ashwaju's economic idea is to refocus Nigeria to begin to export more of our items, but most importantly is also to diversify our income base, our income stream, and that can only be done by increasing our agricultural and manufacturing productivity. Those key issues will, of course, give us a major platform to grow as a country.
It came up, he mentioned the issue of power, and because I asked him some days ago, what in the manifesto is most important to him? And he said is the issue of power generation. Now tell us how you think with power is going to help this economic policy. How is he going to do that?
Okay, because manufacturing is at the bedrock of the sort of productivity that we're looking at, and without power, manufacturing entities and businesses cannot thrive. And so that's very key. Now, if you look at the manifesto, he has said that the issue of Nigerian power cannot be solved overnight, but it will consistently and continue the efforts that the present government has put into power sector, and which is to ensure that our generating capacity, or the power that we're presently generating and that will be incrementally increased, would reach Nigerian homes and businesses. And that's continued the sort of investment that the current government is undertaking when it comes to expanding our grid and, of course, ensuring the sustainability of our transmission system. I think that investment and the leadership that we will bring to bear in that power sector will see to the sustainability.
You talked about unbundling the transmission part of it.
Yes, he did say that. And I think the power experts have alluded to the fact that the centralization of our transmission sector is really inimical to the growth of the power sector generally. So there will be regional hubs regional transmission hubs to ensure that transmission is effectively decentralized to make distribution much more easier.
Okay, there's the aspect of agriculture, which you also spoke about, and we know that the current government also was, driving the aspect of agriculture, talking about eating what we produce. At some point, we had to shut our borders, and all of it. But we still haven't gotten to that point where we can say that we are making so much benefit with regards to agriculture in the country. What do you think we are not getting right that you hope he would address when and if he comes on board?
A couple of things to do with agriculture. I think most importantly is access to finance. It's important to assist agricultural business owners and enterprise to get much more access to finance. I know that the present government has done considerably well with the Anchor Borrower program. Spent over 800 billion, assisting almost 4 million farmers, small-scale farmers, to access capital. But that will be dipping under an Ashwaji government. But most importantly is also to increase our percentage of arable land under cultivation. At present, I think about 30% of it is under cultivation, and the plan is to increase it to at least 65% within the next 4 years. That certainly will increase our capacity to produce what we eat, and of course, export as much as possible to even the West African countries. Beyond that, with agriculture, is also to provide the sort of infrastructure that is required to move the produce from the farm to the market and, of course, to the export hubs. This government has to do, and if you look at some of the infrastructural plans that the manifesto is envisaging, that will see to that, to ensure that movement of those produce, it's much more easier by road, by freight. All of this will add to our productivity.
There's also the aspect of food wastage.
Yes.
Which is a major challenge in the country. How do you want to see that addressed?
Yes, that's very key. That's very key, and that's really one of the areas where we need to work on. If you go, I've been opportunity to travel from Kaduna to Abuja, and along the roads you see all sort of mangoes, heaps of mangoes on the road. Yams, all of that. That's wastage. Now, what Ashwaji has proposed is that in every major cities, major markets, there will be food processing and food storage facilities where produce can be saved and to guard against this sort of wastage. But beyond that, speaking to our food security initiative is to also establish grain reserves to manage this location in supply chain and global trends to at least give us the sort of security that we need where issues like Ukraine war that has occurred and is impacting on supply and prices, and that will give us the sort of stability that we need.
Yeah, we know that sometimes when we talk about the economy, the greatest things that happen to economy are not usually economic. There's the social condition, security, and so on. There's no way we can say that we're going to really tackle this economy without taking care of two important things. One is security, two, corruption. He has talked about the importance of these two in trying to get the economy going. Would that cause delay?
No, that won't cause delay. But like you said, security is the paramount. The lives and the safety and protection of lives and property is the most important responsibility of any government. And we must also acknowledge that security is an ongoing dynamic initiative. Specifically from the security agenda of Ashwaju is that, look, we will continue to increase the personnel that are available for law enforcement and security protection, and from the Nigerian Army to the police to the Air Force, because we feel that at the moment there are not enough of this personnel considering our population. So that also is a job creation element to it. But beyond that is also to look at their welfare, look at their to upgrade their systems and technology that they have, the equipment, and also, of course, look at the sort of logistic and transportation support that they have. Of course, we also must acknowledge that this present government has spent considerable amount of money and effort in building the capacity of the Nigerian Army. That will be done. But most importantly, also to look at the economic and soft power that is available to deal with these underlying issues of security challenges in our communities, and which is economy, which is the economic situation of people. If government does what it should do by bringing growth and development, then there will be less inclination to crime. There will be less inclination to support terrorist group as allies and all of that. So that's really winning the hearts and minds of people. Then the other interesting element of Ashwaju's security agenda is also this place and state of police in Nigeria. I mean, you see Nigerian police personnel now providing security for VIP personnel and guarding buildings. That will stop under an Ashwaju government, and they will be refocused to providing free law enforcement duties, while all of this security and VIP movement will be done by the Nigerian Civil Defense Corps. So those initiatives, I believe, will help bring down the security challenges that we have going forward.
Yeah, but the other part of it is the issue of credit and corruption.
Yes. Well, corruption is, of course, we know the issue, but with corruption, basically, importantly, Ashwaju has said that he's going to give dedicated leadership in the fight against corruption, and it's really by refocusing the civil service, by eliminating wastages, by ensuring that government spending is only mainly for government purpose, and of course putting a cap on public expenditures relating to buildings and recurrent expenditures generally. Those issues, and I think with corruption mainly, beyond the general national reorientation that we require, it's really a place of leadership, how much leadership we see in the face of the fight against corruption. And when we speak about corruption with this government, it's funny when people say, oh, this current APC government is corrupt. But all of the news that come to fore about corruption, we fail to realize that it's still the same government that has arrested and brought those things to fore. And then that shows that it's really, really fighting internally corruption. Like somebody told me that it takes a very, very pious and truthful president for its accountant general to be arrested on humongous charges of corruption. It must really be above board. But the government doesn't get credit for that. What you see is people taking taking it, the other way, to as if it's the government itself that is corrupt. The government is fighting corruption. That's why we hear this news. That's why we see those accusations and those charges being brought to even some of these government officials.
Yes, you need to elaborate on what is said about credit and corruption.
Yes,
giving credit,
thank you for that. If you look at the social impact of this sort of financial structure that we have, Ashwaju believes that is what fuels corruption. And we've discussed it extensively. The act of buying goods and services, particularly homes and certain consumer items, cash and carry, without the requisite credit facility that we know in saner climes, is really what is really behind the penchant for corruption. We see no reason why homes of millions of naira should be bought on a cash and carry basis, really. And it is by institutionalizing the reforms that we require in our credit system that then the pressure to really acquire these things one time will die down. And I think that as a civil servant, if I know that the mortgage payment for my home and of some of the items that I've purchased is tied to my work and my continuous engagement at that work, I'll be mindful of actions and steps that I take that will make me lose my job and certainly then lose the income to pay for my house and pay for my mortgage. So those things really have an impact on how we behave. And I believe that with providing the sort of leadership, because if you look at Ashwaju's agenda on consumer loan, he said, look, he will work with the central bank to ensure that banks dedicate a portion of their loan portfolio to consumer lending. And if that is done, eventually...
What is consumer lending?
Consumer lending, I want to buy a TV, I want to buy a fridge, I want to buy a car, those sort of things that we buy full payments, cash and carry now. It helps when you can finance these things and pay instrumentally over the years or over months. And that way, you're not under pressure to steal or to engage in corrupt activities.
Yeah, like if you live in a Western country, you can live in a house. Everything there, the house itself, you have not finished paying. Your TV, you have not finished paying. Your refrigerator, you have not finished paying. Your washer and dryer, you have not finished paying. But you are using all of them as you are the owner. Even your furniture, you have not finished paying.
But
but you have all of them.
Yes.
So there's no need for you to say you are going to steal in order to buy a TV or a sound system or anything like that.
So what that does is, for those guys that you just described, they don't take their work seriously. They go to work on time, they do their bit on work because they know that's the platform where they maintain and the enjoyment of those things. So it will speak to a lot of our social lifestyle if this sort of credit is available.
Yeah, but there's a problem. Sorry, there's a problem with that data. Because you can't have all of that. There's no really working data. How do you? That's why I said that would all of these programs not be delayed because of certain incidentals like data security. You have to get all these things secure before you can work all of that.
Those things will be engaged and tackled, and in part of our security or our strategic security initiative is, of course, to aggregate all of our national data for security purposes, for economic planning purposes, and those will be useful in projecting this sort of initiatives that we're talking about.
Now, there's this initiative, championing of Buy Made in Nigeria to grow the Nigeria mantra that is said to be also championing. At some point in Nigeria, we talked about Buy Nigeria, Grow the Naira, and all of it. But we know that a lot of Nigerians do not, believe in buying Nigerian-made things, items, so to speak. So it's something that has to begin with the mind, addressing the minds of people to even appreciate what is being done in Nigeria for them to want to purchase what is being made in Nigeria, so to speak. So how do you see him addressing this aspect? Because it's a lot of work. At the time when we talked about Buy Nigeria, Grow the Naira, a lot of people did not embrace it.
Yes, that's a challenge. Like I said, leadership, and I think that leadership will come with a carrot and stick approach. What is important as a government is to begin some form of import substitution mechanism where we're discouraging the importation of luxury items, because when you look at those items, some of them mostly are luxurious, by levying certain threshold of tariffs and taxes to discourage the use of them and encouraging the production of those items locally. But of course, government must ensure that they meet certain standards that we expect of the sort of items that we're encouraging. And that encouragement will come by way of tax incentives and grants to spur growth for the manufacturing of those things. When you look at the gamut of Ashwaji agenda, you will see that there are a lot of tax incentives. Government will use some of its fiscal powers to encourage manufacturing, to encourage job creation, to encourage growth, and that's very key. And I see a lot of people asking how is it going to do that? Those how are in that document. Giving tax incentives, encouraging the employment of a certain quota of young people in business, and then you get a tax rebate in that. That's on how, and that's really a way to spur growth, in our economy.
All right. You want to say something?
Yeah. The budget is trying to change the way budget is benchmarked. So can you speak to that?
Yes. According to his thinking, mostly our budgeting process is usually tied to dollar. Every time you see, we will earn, dollar is projected at $70 to 1 naira and or $250 to 1 naira, and that formed the basis of our budget and budgetary preparations. And what you then see is that once there is a change in that base and parameters, everything is thrown away and thrown to the dog. But what our strategy is proposing is that our budgetary mechanism and process will be based on growth. What do we want to achieve as a people? Oh, I want 6% GDP growth. I want 10% GDP growth. Then I will aspire and budget such that that growth can be at least in front of me, and I will work towards it. So our budgetary cycle will be growth-led, and that's really will speak to sort of infrastructure that you want to provide and build in order to germinate growth within the system. And that's
so
very
talking about it's a budget based on ambition rather than on
forecast.
Currency,
yes,
or forecast.
Currency forecast. And I think it just speaks to the level of ambition that you have for your economy. If you believe that your system and your economic productivity can achieve certain level of growth, then you budget for it. If I think that if I construct the road from Lagos to Calabar, I know the sort of economic activities that will bring forth in the connecting areas, then I will spend the money. And which speaks to the idea of debt, and because sometimes we talk about how government will fund these initiatives.
That's it.
There are no two ways of government raising money than taxation and debt. Money doesn't fall into government from any other places except those two. Are we raising tax or are we raising debt? Clearly, Ashwaja has said that he will not raise taxation under his dispensation, but he will expand the tax net to ensure that a lot of people and more people are paying their fair share of tax. And then it will make judicious use of that taxation to show transparency, to show leadership, to commit to people to pay more. And of course, debt. He said we would contract debt obligations responsibly, such that all debt obligations that will be contracted will be tied to specific projects that are either going to pay themselves or pay the proceeds of that debt, or at least be incremental to our infrastructural development, such that we will see it in the growth that we want. So those are key issues that that is relevant for Nigerians to know. And I dare say that if we look at all of the manifesto of other parties, I've not seen any manifesto that really details the how of how they want to achieve this sort of
Have you read all other manifestos?
I have looked at it. I've looked at it, even though I haven't read them in much detail. But I mean, the feedback that I get from some of their, promoters have not been detailed as to the extent of how we want to deal with some of the issues. That
now, there's the aspect of the digital economy, which he said his administration will actively participate in to birth the fourth industrial revolution, and also target a minimum GDP growth of between 6 to 10%. There are those who think this is ambitious.
It is not ambitious. Already, you see the impact of Nigerian tech industry in Africa, so to speak. We, out of almost about $5 billion investment into African tech space, Nigeria accounted for at least 60–70% of that. So the potentials are there. And what is then required is to build the capacity and provide the enabling environment. As we have enough population and background to begin to take advantage of some of these ICT-enabled outsourcing services that we think will also contribute to that growth.
Speak to these hubs.
The technological hubs.
Not only technological, economic hubs.
I mean, so if you look at the industrial plan of Ashwaju, what is envisaging is that at every region, we will have industrial hubs where we will take advantage of the existing resources within
comparative
that region.
advantage.
Yes, and then so if you look at the Northwest and North Central, for example, we have a lot of mineral resources, gold and all of that. That invariably is even fueling the sort of conflict that the government is dealing with now. So what he's envisaging is that we will, in that area, set up industries and, in that area that will begin to mine those resources, that will begin to develop those resources for the benefit of the community and stakeholders and the benefit of the country. And you come to the Southwest, you look at our own comparative advantage, and then you support the industry around that. And that way, people are able to really thrive in their environments, and then you reduce rural to urban migration, also in that stead.
Back to the aspect of the digital economy, you know that for countries in Africa, majority of countries, and even Nigeria, the aspect of the use of the internet has not been deepened as such. It hasn't even penetrated certain areas in the country. Let's look at that side by side, the digital economy.
It's important. If we say that we want to increase GDP growth by, increasing the output from the digital economy, it's important that we also deepen our broadband access and, internet access to usage. Ashwaju has promised that in his 4 years of government, at least 90 to 95% of Nigerians will have access to broadband connectivity. And that's already being done by government's initiative to reduce the cap and specify a cap as to how much you can lay fiber optic around the country. That's a significant boost to the industry, and that will help down the line to ensure the sort of penetration we need to boost e-commerce. And importantly also is look at our e-commerce ecosystem. We know that there's vibrancy in that. People now do business by Instagram and WhatsApp and supply far-flung places. And what government needs to do and what Ashwaju will do to further encourage and deepen this sense of entrepreneurship is to provide the sort of logistic and haulage infrastructure that is required to make those businesses thrive. If e-commerce, the backbone of e-commerce is real good public transportation model where people can move from one place to the other. You can deliver your goods and all of that, and that will be at the forefront of the
and sequel to that is the aspect of cybersecurity, which is also a major challenge.
Of course, data protection, and just to ensure that all of the data and information that we're sharing online is safe and secure. And I think that's where leadership and government regulations will come into place. And I have no doubts that that will be what Ashwaju will bring to the table as the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Oil and gas. How much thinking has gone into the challenges of getting a pipeline through the Sahara?
So with our oil and gas, the most important thing from an incoming government of Ashwaju perspective is to earn as much resources as we can from our natural resources to take advantage of global prices in oil. And when we speak specifically to our oil and our crude aspect, Ashwaju has said that it will increase our production barrel per day from what it is now to 2.6 million in the first year, and then to 4.6 million by the end of the decade in the first 3 years, and then the 4.6 million by the end of the decade. And the way to do that, the way it intends to do that is simple. First and foremost, ensure that what we are producing and transporting within our pipelines now are secure, so you stop oil theft, which is critical, and of course make continuous investment in exploration of resources in Lake Chad and all of that. I think that to your question about how much thought has gone into putting pipelines across that place is about the security of those places. If we continue in the trend that we've started, which is ensuring that all of our part of our country is safe and secure, then putting pipelines across that place would not be a problem. But specifically, our major focus as a people should be our gas potentials. Nigeria has abundant gas potentials. That we need to focus on. And there's no better way to do that than to complete some of the 7 critical projects that will be credited to taking us to that level. And Ashwaju has committed to doing that. Of course, he's also committed to ensuring that we stop gas flaring. And the penalties for that is that whichever of the companies that do not subscribe or fail to meet the gas flaring stipulations will be fined, and that fine will be used to clean up the communities in which they have disrupted. So there's robust thinking around our oil and gas sector, much more of course, to deepen the reform that has been started under this present administration, under the PIA, and we can only get better from there.
There's another aspect of our economics that the Nigerians are also speaking about, which has to do with confidence in the Naira. We see recently the CBN redesigning of the Naira, has plunged the Naira further down when you look at the exchange rate. Some are saying about over 800 Naira, that is what it is as it stands now. From what you have seen with regards to the document, how do you think that confidence is going to be restored from the manifesto, what you have seen? How is confidence going to be restored in the Naira such that a lot of businesses, we benefit and thrive at the end of the day?
Thank you. I think the most important signal from the business sector that the business sector expects from government regarding monetary policy and Naira exchange management is coherence, basic coherence between the fiscal, people running the fiscal affairs, fiscal policy, and the monetary policies. At the moment, what we see is divergence of opinions and a strategy of how to address that. So from an Asiwaju perspective, there will be both the fiscal monetary fiscal policy and the monetary aspect will be speaking with one voice. But most importantly, with the Naira exchange rates, I mean, we know how emotive that discussion is, and it's indeed should be, because the price of the Naira to the dollar does have impact on our export competitiveness, has impact on our foreign reserve and all of that. So it's important that we take it seriously. But what Asiwaju has said is that the strength of the Naira will be based on the depth of our productivity and growth. And as far as we continue to import, that's a challenge. So if we build our competitiveness on real productivity, then Naira will begin to find its place, within the right balance. So, like I said, fiscal coherence between those in charge of monetary policy and those in charge of fiscal policy, coherence rather between those two guys will really give business the kind of confidence that they require to then go ahead and venture.
He spoke about the church rat and the poisoned Holy Communion. So it's really focusing on the environment, the climate change, and these have far-reaching consequences for the economy.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on what point I was trying to make?
It's simple. I mean, the global trend now is climate change, net zero, reducing fossil fuel usage and all of that, which is all good for the global climate discourse. But we also must look at our individual realities and determine where we are in the scheme of things and what we are contributing to damaging the climate and who has contributed what and what is expected. As we speak, if we are to follow the trajectory of global discourse around climate change and environmental cleanup, then we would not have recourse to coal energy, we would not have recourse to even crude energy that that is important for us to reach some level of development that we aspire to. So what Asiwaju was saying in essence is that we need to be careful the sort of medicine we take or the sort of policy initiatives we embrace, that are in global trends and that will now limit our ability to grow. And this is speaking from the reality that our contribution to the climate issue is minimal. And even at the projected developmental agenda that we have, it will still be very, very, very minimal. So let us focus and really get to the basics rather than, abandoning some of the key ingredients that we require for growth in the name of subscribing to the global climate agenda. And I think it's clear as a country, if we want to grow, we still need to have recourse to some of this oil that the Europeans and the developed country are saying. And indeed, reality has shown now that those things might not be cast in stone, as we see from European countries now using coal in the advent of the Russian-Ukraine war and all of that. So really and truly, we need to look inwards and determine what best suits us before we jump into the bandwagon. And that's what Ashwajo was saying in essence.
Can you speak to the Industrial Development Master Plan, talking about also reviving some industries as well?
Yes. The key item to really reviving our industrial plan, and the plan for Ashwajo is to harmonize our industrial policy with our infrastructural policy. Those, they go hand in hand. And the key thing is using tax generally to incentivize industries to begin to produce and manufacture locally. And that's what I said by also putting industries in key regions to harmonize or take advantage of the economic of scales and the comparative advantage that different communities offer.
Right.
Well, there is this issue of land clearing. It's a very important aspect of the agricultural policy and also reviving an economy. Are there areas that have been identified for this land clearing?
That land clearing also speaks to our desire to move our cultivation, our land under cultivation from 35% to 65%. And in doing that, is basically to look at the existing acreage of land that are not cultivated, clear them, because I was speaking to somebody that was involved or that is involved in agric enterprise, and what I was made to understand is that land clearing is the most singular, big ticket item for farmers generally. Before, they have to rent bulldozers, clear and all of that. So if government takes that responsibility of them and make land available for farming, either small scale, large scale, and all of that, that will open up and really boost our agricultural productivity. So importantly is to do that, and using the 11 river basin that we have to ensure that there are irrigation to those areas, and we'll see the effect in our agricultural productivity.
I remember even the land that you have, the farm you still have to clear it. I remember in the village in those days, my grandfather at the beginning of the season will clear the farm. That's his job. That's the only time he goes to the farm. Then my grandmother now will be going to farm every day.
Yes. As a matter of fact, once you've cleared the farm, it's easy to plant. Planting is, that's why they will send your grandmother to go and plant, because the hard work is the clearing. And then what then happens is...
And fencing it so that snakes and animals, when they want to come, they get into the traps and they become meat
and food. So importantly, is that land clearing is very crucial, and I'm happy that an Ashwaji government is going to put it at the forefront of boosting our agricultural productivity.
There's also the aspect of addressing oil theft. You know how it is that the government is just looking at addressing it. This current government is just looking at addressing that aspect. Looking at how much we have lost thus far with regards to that aspect. Can you speak from that point of view?
Apart from the leadership that is required, then there must be some creativity around securing some of the pipelines. And Ashwaju's plan is to develop a critical infrastructural protection plan. And that plan would envisage protecting our critical national assets, our pipelines, our transmission lines, our network connectivity lines, and all of that. There will be a contingency plan to keep protecting those things. And he has spoken about, like I said, creative ways of probably embedding some of this pipeline going forward in some submarine development, right, so that it makes it difficult for people to access, and of course use technology and area surveillance to monitor and protect them. So that's very key. But like I said, I think the most important thing is that the protection of our critical national assets will be embodied in a critical infrastructural protection plan that you will put forward.
All right. We'll have to leave the conversation here now, but we must thank you, Lawyer Oluwaseun Faleye, for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Very good.